All righty, good evening. Today is Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. I'm Matthew Underwood again, coming at you again for live tonight. I'm going to be doing these every weeknight. Like I said, first video I did was on a Friday night. That was September 12th. Just wanted to make something. And that was kind of the first thing I did. I didn't do it live. I could have done it live, should have done it live. But just pre-recorded it, uploaded it. It was a nightmare. I never should have done that. Learned my lesson. Was planning on going live Monday night, but was unable to get on. Look, I'm brand new at this. I don't know what I'm doing still. So bear with me. I was trying to go live on Monday, but made a mistake. And then last night couldn't. But tonight I'm back at it. And I'm going to plan on making this a weekly night thing. Do it as many weeknights as I possibly can. But it's great to be back with everyone. I think we're going to have a great show in store for you today. So, just kind of wanted to get right into it, just start off by talking about kind of the events that we've seen since when I was on last time. That was Friday last week. And, Friday last week, I did a big video, of course, about the Charlie Kirk assassination and what I felt the significance was, what I thought kind of, just the significance and the tragedy of it all, and just wanted to get out there and make something in reaction to it, and motivated by it, frankly. But tonight I wanted to kind of dig a little bit deeper into some topics regarding it, because now we know who the killer was. This nut job. Actually, I shouldn't call him a nut job because some of these people are mentally deranged. This guy was not mentally deranged. She was totally sound of mind, totally stable. This was a politically motivated assassination, cut and dry. That's simple. This is a open and shut case from my opinion. Okay. Now there's been a lot of people out there who are raising red flags in regards to this case. I'm not one of those people. Okay. And I think for those right wingers out there who are creating conspiracies about this case, I think it is a massive disservice to the significance of the assassination. I think it's a massive disservice to our movement. I'm going to explain why, because this is about as cut and dry, open and shut, clean, political, left-wing assassination committed by a radical as you can possibly see in a case. This guy, even in a liberal city, he's going to get the chair. I don't see how he's not going to be executed. So, of course, that guy who I keep referring to, the assassin, goes by the name of Tyler Robinson, is his name. And so far what we know about him is he was basically raised in a normal conservative family. I think one of the funniest tweets I've seen in so long was some liberal nut job. I don't have the tweet in front of me, but basically the gist of the tweet was because right after the assassination, the left wing was trying to frame this guy as somehow being like a right winger, trying to pretend that he was like a graper or something like that, which was totally absurd, absolute lies. I'm going to expand on all that later on. But one of these stupid leftist Twitter accounts, this is the biggest self-own ever. I swear to God, I can't even believe that this is an actual tweet. Basically said, and again, I don't have the tweet in front of me, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically said, Tyler Robinson is a clean-cut white kid from a normal family. How can he ever be a man of the left? It's like, do you even realize the self-own? Okay, so leftist, you can only be a leftist if you are raised in a dysfunctional nightmare situation, have no good loyal family. But if you actually have a good normal family, then that predisposes you towards being right wing, which of course it does, obviously. If you're raised in a stable 2-parent household and your parents are responsible, that does predispose you to the right wing. That's what we all know, but it's just nice to see a leftist admit that. But no, this guy was a politically motivated assassin who wanted to kill Charlie Kirk because he was an insane. Again, actually, he wasn't. He was a radical leftist. I'm going to say insane. It's just because it's instinctual to me. That's just kind of the terminology. But he wasn't insane. This is not someone who is mental. This is not someone who is mentally deranged. This is someone who was a radical. This was a political radical. He was completely sane in doing it. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it for entirely political reasons. So I do want to kind of just, recap what we know about this guy, Tyler Robinson. So apparently Tyler Robinson, he went to university briefly. And during his time, or he was raised, again, stable 2-parent household in Utah, just normal, nice white family, grew up in the suburbs, picket fence, all that American dream, traditional, what you think of type stuff. And eventually he goes to college. I can't recall what college he went to. I don't believe it was Utah Valley University, which was the school in which Charlie Kirk was murdered. I think it was a different school in Utah. I can't recall which one it was, but I don't believe it was Utah Valley they attended, but I could be wrong. I don't think he stayed long though. He dropped out within I don't know, he maybe did a semester there or so. And then he started going to trade school, I believe is what he was doing. I mean, he was only 22, I believe. I think 22 or 23. I mean, he's younger than me. And not that I'm particularly, I'm young, but I'm not that young. And during that time, when he was, from all accounts, when he was being raised, he wasn't super political. And if he was, he probably leaned to the right just because his parents, by all accounts, were conservatives. They were Trump supporters. And then, goes off to college. And I see a lot of people on the right. And this isn't to say that they're not wrong in a sense, but a lot of people on the right have been saying, parents, this is what happens when you send your kids to college. They get indoctrinated by these radical professors. And from what I can tell, it doesn't seem that Tyler Robinson was indoctrinated at college. I mean, he wasn't even there for very long. He was there for maybe a semester and then dropped out. This is not a guy who was radicalized at college. That's not to say that colleges, universities, educational institutions in general aren't an absolute cancer on American society. It's not to say that professors and teachers are the lowest form of scum on this planet. Excuse me. It's not to say they're not the lowest form of scum on this planet outside of maybe journalists, but really other than journalists and teachers, those are the lowest forms of life that exist in this country. Those are the scum of the earth. And so it's not to say that, teachers, professors aren't total scum. It's not to say that universities are not, just the worst institutions on the planet. 50% of them or more should be shut down. Probably 75% of the people that actually go to university should not go. They're just getting bullshit degrees. So, it's not to say any of that. All right. The academic system in America is broken. We all know that. But that was not what radicalized him, not from what I can tell. From what I can tell, Tyler Robinson was radicalized online, purely online, which, is what I'm doing right now. Now, of course, I'm not a leftist. Okay. I'm quite the opposite. But he was radicalized almost entirely online. And this was from the dark depths of Reddit. Just Reddit is a dumpster fire. If anyone knows anything about Reddit, it's run by basically the most, it's all moderated, it's all basically user engineered, and all the users there are just the most toxic, just puke in your mouth, blue haired, nose ringed, tattooed leftist cunts. Those are the people who run Reddit, right? They're all the moderators there. And, it's just a hellhole. Reddit is just a shithole. But he was certainly radicalized on Reddit. In Discord channels, it seems that he was radicalized there. Not that Discord is necessarily a social media site. It's really just more of a messaging site. But obviously, he got involved with some leftist Discord chats. And but I think above all else, he was radicalized by people like me who do what I'm doing right now. Streamers, guys like Destiny and Hassan Piker, and these really just boneheaded, stupid, radical leftists online who do live streams and who do podcasts. I think that's who really radicalized him. Just based off of what I've seen. And so he's radicalized and he's so radicalized that he ends up in a romantic relationship with a transsexual. Shocker, right? I did say he wasn't insane, and I stand by that. He wasn't insane, but obviously he was off his rocker a little bit. I mean, at the very least, he was a homosexual definitely a homosexual. Without a doubt, he was a homosexual. But obviously, like I said, he ended up in a relationship with a transsexual. I think certainly in part thanks to radicalization online. Not to mention, I think probably a big part of that as well was not only online radicalization. There was another form of online radicalization that I think definitely played a part, and I'm sure that was the pornography that he was watching. I mean, you don't just go from normal white, middle class family, white picket fence, suburbs, conservative parents, and then end up fucking a transsexual. You know what I mean? Yeah, that doesn't just happen overnight. I'm certain some really, really out there disgusting pornography played a major role in that. But he ends up in a relationship with a transsexual, which of course, and just to touch on that a little bit, when the shooting first happened, there was actually a bunch of right-wing Twitter accounts found, I don't know if it was Reddit posts or Discord posts or Twitter posts even, of a transsexual, male to female, because they mostly are. The really crazy ones are. And it was a transsexual male to female who went to Utah Valley University and had posted something like the day before, like something's going to go down tomorrow or something along those lines. And a lot of people were pointing to this person as like, that's the killer, like FBI, look into this person. And it was not that person. It was not that tranny. Certainly, I mean, a scum of the earth, don't get me wrong, but did not pull the trigger. But there was an obvious assumption kind of early on that this was probably done by someone who was a leftist and probably had some sort of connection to the trans community, whether they were trans themselves or, in the case of Tyler Robinson, were, a supporter of transsexualism, and so much so that was in an active relationship with a transsexual. So, that person, they ended up clearing that person. That was not the person who did it. And actually, not that I felt bad for this person, the transsexual who was initially fingered for the shooting, but I did kind of feel bad for him in a certain way, because I heard from a show that this guy was a fan of, that he was like called in and was like, hey, this was not me. Like, I swear to God, this is not me. And, they ended up catching the guy. It was not this person. Did kind of feel bad for them, but obviously we were all on the right track. I mean, the moment Charlie got was murdered, was assassinated, it was obvious it had to be something political. It had to be something political. And if it's something political and it came from the left and it was violence, it doesn't take a hop, skip, and a jump to come to the conclusion that there was some sort of transsexual involvement. I mean, we've seen, even just so recently, I mean, it's already out of the news. I mean, first you had Irina, the poor woman, the Ukrainian who was murdered on the subway. That kind of took over the news, or not the subway, but the train in Charlotte. That kind of took over the news initially before Charlie was assassinated. Although we haven't forgot about you, Irina. I'm going to touch on that later. That kind of took over the news first. But before that took over the news, it was this transsexual who shot up the school in Minneapolis and killed a couple of poor kids and gravely injured a handful more. And, it's not the first time we've seen that type of violence from transsexuals. You saw it in Nashville, another school shooting where a transsexual who was actually a female to male had gone to a Christian school and killed like 3 kids and 3 adults. And, it's this sort of transsexual violence. It's not an apparition. Okay. It's not an aberration. It's something that we see a lot. We're going to keep seeing it as long as we tolerate transsexualism as legitimate in our society. As long as we see it, we're going to see more violence coming from them against innocent people. We're going to keep seeing that violence. I actually, I have to give credit where credit is due. I believe it was Aaron McIntyre, who's great, by the way. If you're watching this, go give Aaron McIntyre a follow on X. Watch his show. He's on the Blaze. He's phenomenal. I really like him. But he coined the term. He coined the term. I think the title of his show one day this past week was "Rise of the Tranissaries," which I love that term. These violent transsexuals, calling them Tranissaries. I love that. And for those of you who don't know, it's a play off the term Janissary. Janissary was it was a term used during the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire basically what the Tranissaries, what the Janissaries were they were soldiers who were basically, as children, they were taken as slaves from Christian families in territories that the Ottomans had conquered. And they were enslaved very young, and then they were raised from almost birth to be soldiers. And they were like the elite soldiers of the Ottoman Empire. And just vicious, violent, totally indoctrinated from a young age in Islam and everything Ottoman. And I thought that play on words, calling them these violent transsexuals who do this type of horrible terroristic violence, calling them Tranissaries, I thought that was hilarious, very clever. And I'm going to go ahead and appropriate the term here because I think it is excellent. But, you see these violent transsexuals. And again, this was not the first. I mean, not that Tyler Robinson was a transsexual, but there is a transsexual connection, transvestite connection that we've seen here with Tyler Robinson being in a relationship with a transitioning individual. And, it's not unique. A lot of people kind of assumed that. And of course, that's what it came out to be. Now, I want to take a step back for a second. And I want to talk about some of the reactions that I've seen on the right in particular since the assassination, and or not really since the assassination, but since the capture of Tyler Robinson. There are a lot of right-wingers who are going down a conspiracy rabbit hole. And it seems that conspiracy rabbit hole starts at the general conspiracy I'm seeing. And of course, this conspiracy involves the Israelis, which I understand it to a degree. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Israel. I'm not going to go into all my views on Israel tonight, but a lot of sort of right-wingers, I saw Candace Owens today. I didn't watch her whole show, but briefly. She is definitely questioning this event. And I would advise against that, just for right-wingers. I'm not saying that all conspiracy theories are false, okay? I think there's some out there that we should definitely look more into. I think there's some that are provable, that there actually was a conspiracy. We can look to it and say, these people conspired to do X, Y, Z, whether it's Russiagate or it's Watergate. These are conspiracies where we can prove what people were doing. There's other conspiracies where I think that, I don't really know for sure. I think that I would like to see more evidence. I think JFK is a great example of a conspiracy theory where I'm not going to say one way or another who killed JFK, but I'm not sold on anything necessarily. I'm certainly not sold that Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole shooter. I'm not necessarily sold, that there was a grand conspiracy either. I think it's something where we want more information there. But, a lot of these conspiracies, they revolve around Israel, and the essentially what the conspiracy theory is, from what I could glean, at least, is this goes back to a meeting that Charlie Kirk had, I think like a month ago or something like that. And it was a meeting with Bill Ackman, who is a big-time Zionist billionaire. He's a Silicon Valley guy. I want to say he was involved in something AI. That's how he made his money. It wasn't like, I think it was something AI is how Ackman made his money. And he was in a meeting with Ackman and a lot of other major donors. And they were all pushing Charlie Kirk to be a lot more supportive of Israel, which historically speaking, Charlie was. Okay. Charlie was a big time Israel supporter. Now, he wasn't one of these slavishly loyal, Israel people like a Ted Cruz or a Ben Shapiro, not one of those guys. But he was always very supportive of Israel and very much believed in that sort of biblical interpretation of, I don't know the Genesis quote, but all these evangelicals, basically, they cite this Genesis quote, and they believe that Israel is going to play a big role in the end times. And so for that, they're slavishly loyal to the state of Israel. And apparently behind the scenes, Charlie was having, he obviously was young, was very in touch with the thoughts of young people. And obviously Israel is extremely unpopular nowadays amongst young people, extremely unpopular amongst young people across political parties, by the way, across the political spectrum. Really the only group that still supports the state of Israel and America's current relationship with the state of Israel in the midst of the Gaza war is older Republicans, boomer Republicans, boomer cons, as we call them. Outside of that, young people across the spectrum are giving up. And Charlie was starting to feel that. I mean, he was starting to feel that on college campuses, that this opposition to America's current relationship with Israel was organic. It was not just on the left. It was not just these free Gaza, free Palestine, psycho protesters like we see at Columbia, which, you can hate Israel all you want, or not even hate Israel, just like, I don't hate Israel, but you can have an oppositional approach to Israel. You can be opposed to America's current relationship with Israel on the right. But I think we should all be able to agree on the right. Those Gaza people, those Columbia protesters, those Zoran Mamdanis, those types of people are not our friends. Okay. They are not our friends. Even if you may agree with them on Israel, which I don't agree with them on Israel, by the way, and I can be critical of Israel, but I don't agree with them to the degree that they are critical of Israel at all. But even if you did, those are still your enemies, because trust me, they hate America just as much, if not more, than they hate Israel, okay? But even amongst right-wingers, there's this increasing skepticism, particularly amongst young right-wingers, towards Israel. I mean, we are, millennials are the Iraq war generation, and Gen Z, us Zoomers, we're the generation that came up, during that time. We didn't fight in it. We were too young, but we witnessed the global war on terror. We grew up in the global war on terror. And there is very much this opinion among younger conservatives that Israel far too often dictates American foreign policy to our own detriment. And I happen to agree with that assessment to a degree. I don't think it's a conspiratorial thing. I just think there's a lot of Americans, whether they're evangelicals or they're Jewish Zionists, who are very powerful, and they have a lot of influence over both political parties, particularly the Republican Party, because you have the evangelical wing and the Republican Party, who are just naturally inclined, because of their own personal beliefs, as much as I think they're flawed beliefs, towards slavish devotion to Israel. And through a lot of that slavish devotion, the United States, I think, has gotten involved in a lot of really, really bad foreign policy mishaps. So, it's not to say, I'm the biggest Israel fan or anything like that, but basically the story goes of these people who are trying to create a conspiracy out here regarding Charlie Kirk's assassination is that it all starts with that meeting with Bill Ackman, who I believe I was wrong when I said he was an AI guy. I want to say he has some connection to Silicon Valley, but he's a big hedge fund guy. He's a very big hedge fund guy. That's how he made most of his money was hedge funds, Wall Street. And he's in this meeting with Bill Ackman, a lot of other billionaires, and Charlie could feel the sort of grassroots opposition to Israel and sort of grassroots, much more isolationist or realist foreign policy growing amongst particularly the young right. And Charlie was starting to react to that based off of his closest confidants, his closest friends. They're echoing the same thing, that Charlie was starting to, I don't know if it's having a genuine shift of opinion or if he was just starting to have a reactive opinion to the wider, the wider young sort of conservative youth who were very much changing drastically on foreign policy issues. And I think younger conservatives share almost nothing in common with boomer cons when it comes to foreign policy. I mean, the boomers grew up in the era of the Cold War. A lot of them are very sympathetic to sort of neocon ideas, whereas you say neocon to a young conservative and we want to throw up in our mouths. I mean, we just immediately think of Bush and all the disaster that brought. And Charlie was starting to feel that pressure from the grassroots and was starting to change his opinions. Not publicly, not entirely yet, but he was going to go in that direction. This is what we've heard from a lot of his close friends. And at that meeting with Ackman and many others, they were basically trying to push Charlie like, hey, we're big donors to you, but Israel's a big thing for us. You need to stay strong in Israel. You need to stay slavishly devoted to Israel, or maybe we need to pull our money. And, Charlie was so big at that point that he was basically telling them, I don't really need your money. Turning Point is massive. It's the biggest political organization in America, especially when it comes to grassroots support, getting out the vote, all of those things. And Charlie was basically saying, hey, even if we disagree on these handful of foreign policy issues, I'm still better than the alternative at the end of the day. And from that meeting, the conspiracy then goes, well, Charlie had to be eliminated because he was an Israel guy, or because he was abandoning Israel. And so the Mossad or CIA or whatever assassinated him. And this Tyler Robinson guy is just a patsy. He's just another Lee Harvey Oswald, who, by the way, I'm not even convinced was a patsy. I mean, I'm not to say that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't a patsy, but I'm not entirely convinced that he didn't pull the trigger. I think there's definitely a chance that he was the sole assassin in the Kennedy assassination. Not that I'm convinced of that one way or another, but so there's this sort of conspiracy on the right that it comes from that, and that they killed him because he was going to abandon his support of Israel and change tone on Israel, whatever. And no one has come out and said that. No one has come out and said that, but there are a lot of people on the right. I would point Candace Owens would probably be the most prominent right now, who is very close friends with Charlie Kirk. So, I'm not going to criticize her by any means directly. I mean, was really, really close friends with Charlie, probably closer than, most other people in his life. She might've been his closest friend, one of his closest friends, I should say. They totally came up together. They were really, really close. She was extremely emotional after the assassination, as you can probably imagine. But, she was full on, totally questioning the entire narrative regarding Tyler Robinson and this assassin and the story surrounding it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Certainly question everything, particularly that the government says. But please, I am begging the right, do not dive into this conspiratorial nonsense regarding Tyler Robinson, okay? Because it dilutes the truth of what led to Charlie Kirk's assassination, okay? To try and take the blame off of anyone other than Tyler Robinson and his enablers is a disservice to the right. It's a disservice to Charlie Kirk. It's a disservice to America, okay? Because this was obvious. This was a radical left-wing terrorist. It was someone who was radicalized online by psychos like Hassan Piker and Destiny, violent sociopaths, supported in Discord chats, supported on social media by a bunch of blue-haired, disfigured, disgusting, ugly leftists all over supporting this sort of radical, violent type of behavior. And of course, condoned either tacitly or explicitly by the mainstream media, who at the very least just wants to move on from this and wants to pretend that there is no such thing as left-wing violence so they can continue supporting their causes. And at the very most, quietly cheers it on, okay? That is what created this guy, okay? Not to mention, it's all of those things. Plus, I think, like I said, particularly when it comes to transsexual stuff, and he was in a relationship with a transvestite, obviously something that played a role in all that was, I'm sure he was consuming some really fucked up pornography. I mean, I think that definitely contributed to at least his own personal, sexual proclivities, which are, disgusting and everything. But I think all that definitely contributed. But in terms of the political ideology, this is not a conspiracy, people. Question things. That's fine. Question the FBI, question the official story. I'm not opposed to that at all. Okay. Question everything. But to take the jump and take the leap and try to blame someone or something other than the killer and those individuals on the left who would support this violence, those individuals on the left who have encouraged this type of behavior for years at this point, and those who cheered on the violence, they are your enemy here, okay? There is not some vague, unknown hidden enemy that is part of a conspiracy, pulling the strings that set this guy up or whatever. They are your enemy. They are in academia. They are in the media. They are online. They are in your everyday life. They're your barista at Starbucks, for God's sakes. They're in your fucking local theater troupe, okay? It's these deranged psycho leftists. And we know exactly who I'm talking about here. You know, these people, they have just been sucked up and spit out by society. It's their own fault, by the way. These people are ugly. And I don't mean ugly like just some people, you know, they get a bad roll of the dice. You know, they're just born ugly, okay? I'm not the best looking guy myself, all right? But I mean they're ugly to their soul. And then that comes out on the outside, you know, piercings, tattoos, dyed hair. You know what I'm talking about when I describe your prototypical leftist. When you see these TikTok videos of these people celebrating Charlie Kirk's assassination, you know, it's obvious. You know who these people are. You see them every day. They're on your college campuses. They're in your schools. They go to jobs. You know, you recognize these people. You know, just in your own daily dealings with them, in the few times you have to deal with them, you know they're abnormal. You know they're psychos. You know there's something wrong with them in the head. You know they're ugly on the outside and to their core. It is this type of degenerate leftist. The way these people think, egged on by the media, egged on by each other online, egged on by streamers and these types of other, you know, leftists, like again, Destiny, Hassan Piker, people have just said reprehensible things and actively called for violence. Unlike Charlie Kirk, who never called for violence, unlike even a Nick Fuentes, who is pretty radical but has never called for violence. These guys have openly called for violence on their streams. I mean, there's all these clips out there of Hassan, for God's sakes, just being like, kill them. I want blood in the streets, pounding on his desk like the angry little twerp that he is. And, you know, it's those people. It's this. It's people in our country. It's people who we can actually see. We can name them. We know them. We know them. All right. They're in our institutions. They run a lot of our institutions, for God's sakes. Those are the people who are guilty for this. Okay. Those are the people who make Tyler Robinsons happen. Those are the people who create the conditions where you can have a Tyler Robinson. So my message is to all of these to all of these right wingers, rather, who are trying to read more into this than is really there, who are trying to create some sort of conspiracy out of this when none exists. Don't do that. This is a slam dunk for us. This is a political assassination committed by a radicalized, crazy leftist who was in a relationship with a transvestite, okay? This is as cut and dry, open and shut as it possibly gets. This is a radical left-winger, radicalized online in reaction to and in speaking with other left-wingers. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. Do not be confused. Do not be mistaken. The left is your enemy. They are opposed to everything that is good and human and just and healthy and natural and right. They are unnatural. They are unhealthy. They are unjust. They are anti-God, anti-human, anti-human nature. We know this. And it is those attitudes that directly resulted in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Do not be mistaken there. Do not be confused. I know we all love conspiracy theories. We love to talk about them. We love to think about them. I'm not here to say that all conspiracy theories are false. Again, you want to point to a real conspiracy where you actually have evidence of it? Russiagate, Russia collusion scandal. This was a conspiracy by deep state individuals to implicate Donald Trump in a fake scandal to try and run him out of government. Watergate. I'm going to do a whole deep dive episode on Watergate later on. Watergate was a coup d'etat. It was a conspiracy between people in the media and the deep state to set up Nixon and get him out of office because he was threatening and was going to remove a tremendous amount of power from the deep state, from the permanent bureaucracy. Kennedy, I mean, I think Kennedy, again, on the Kennedy assassination, I always say when it comes to that, I don't know. I mean, on one end, you could have some vast conspiracy. I mean, I'm not convinced. But on the other end, you could have Lee Harvey Oswald just being the sole shooter. I'm not convinced of that either. I don't think there's good evidence either way that supports either conclusion. There are cases where conspiracies are real. But in this case, not only is the conspiracy obviously not real, not only is it that there is a preponderance of evidence that this guy is the shooter, this guy is the assassin. What good does it serve you, the conspiracies? They're only detrimental to our cause. The focus of the right must be, this was a leftist. They are all like this. The only thing preventing these leftists on TikTok from murdering you, raping your wife, killing your children in front of your eyes, and laughing while they do it is because they are afraid that they will get caught. That is the only thing stopping them. Only thing stopping them. And by the way, same is true for Hassan Piker. Same is true for Destiny. Same is true for many, many individuals in the mainstream media as well. The only thing that is stopping them from murdering you and raping your wife and raping your sister and murdering your children, the only thing that's stopping them is the threat of the law, that they will get caught and they will go to jail. They all think this way. They all think this way. And behind closed doors, I guarantee you, this Tyler Robinson, his friends, his lover, I think, were tacitly supportive of all of this. So the point that I'm making here, there's a couple of points. First point would be, don't dive too deep into the conspiracies, not when there's this preponderance of evidence. The other point that I would make is, it doesn't serve us any good. This is a defining moment where the divide between good and evil could not be more clear. It could not be more obvious which side is on the side of the good and which side is on the side of evil. Don't get distracted from that. Your enemy is the left. We have to defeat them. There's no negotiating with them. There's no debate with them. They have to be defeated. Not killed, but they have to be defeated. We have to restore an America where they no longer have any power whatsoever, to the point where their ideas are so socially unacceptable that to even think them up, they would be driven out of polite society for the rest of their lives. That is the mission. This assassination cannot make it any more clear. Do not get distracted. Do not get distracted is all I'm saying. Now, take it back a little bit. I mentioned, again, I love Aaron McIntyre's coining of this term, the Tranissaries. These are violent people, There was someone somewhere, I want to say it was Michael Knowles, who's one of the Daily Wire guys, who I saw basically made the point that, right-wingers always love to point to the trans suicide statistics, because if you look at long-term studies of transvestite, transsexual individuals, they tend to have extremely high suicide rates, like 40+%. And those suicide rates tend to stay the same pre and post transition. It doesn't really make any difference one way or the other. They still have extremely high suicide rates compared to the normal population. And these statistics are often pointed to on the right as like, look, this is obvious proof that these people are not mentally well. They're obviously mentally unstable. They should not be, transitioned or whatever. They should be treated. And I don't mean treated in terms of, they call transitioning, hormone therapy, all this stuff, treatment. That's not treatment, but they should be treated in a real way, in a psychological way that allows them to accept their own bodies. And there's nothing wrong with that. It is a valid point that the right makes, but I believe it was Michael Knowles who said, in actuality, the transgender suicide rate is 100%. It's 100%. And it's absolutely correct. Whether you actually kill yourself or not, these transsexuals, they say whatever their name was before they changed their gender, their sex, whatever. They call it their dead name. And if you call them by their dead name, they say you're dead naming them. Like if you called Caitlyn Jenner Bruce Jenner, he's Bruce. But if you call him Bruce Jenner, you'd say that Bruce would be his dead name. In a sense, that's correct. Because that person, for all intents and purposes, is dead. These transsexuals and their hubris and their nihilism and the fact that they don't believe in God, the fact that they believe themselves to be higher than God, they have killed their true selves and transformed into something else. Something that's false, something that's fake, something that is mutilated and disgusting and ugly, as we all know, but they have, in a certain sense, killed themselves. 100% of them have. And so it's no surprise, not to say that Tyler Robinson, he was not a transvestite, Tyler Robinson, but he was in a sexual relationship with one. It's not a surprise that all this violence comes from that group of people, because they are inherently violent towards themselves. I mean, if you hate yourself that much, of course it's only a matter of time before you're going to turn your hatred towards the normal people in the world, towards the sane people in the world, until you turn your hatred fundamentally towards God. Because what you're trying to do is you are rejecting the way that God has made you. And you are angry at God that God made you this way. And ultimately, your anger and your rage and your hatred is going to be directed towards God. That's why all these trans shootings, all these trans terror attacks, what have they been targeted at? Christian schools and Charlie Kirk, who couldn't be more goddamn Christian, couldn't be more of a religious believer. Devoted his life to Christ above all else. Charlie did. And of course, that's who they're targeting, because they're targeting God. They hate themselves. They hate the way that God made them. And that's where their anger is directed. So, again, you have this leftist culture, and it's in the individuals, your average leftist that you see on TikTok that I'm sure, gave Tyler Robinson all these ideas. You see it online. Again, I've mentioned Hassan. I've mentioned Destiny a bunch of times in the stream. You see it in the media. The media is a lot more polished about it, but they're just as bad. You see that sort of violent rhetoric out there that would drive someone to do something like this. You see the way they characterize anyone who disagrees with them that would drive someone to do something like this. But you got to combine that with a certain hatred of self and hatred of the world to then drive someone to do what Tyler Robinson did, what the trans shooter in Minnesota did, etc. And it's that wicked combination that creates what we saw last Wednesday, a week ago. Damn, it's already a week. But it's that combination that causes us to see what we saw a week ago when Charlie was assassinated, and in many other circumstances where you've seen violence perpetrated by these freaks. But I actually I did want to go into all this, but it just to hammer my point home. Don't get distracted if you're on the right. Don't get distracted is all I'm saying. Again, I don't have any problem with questioning the FBI's narrative and making sure that they're completely transparent and release all the information on Charlie's assassination. I think that's fine, and that's all well and good, and that's great. But don't take your eye off the ball. Know who your enemy is. Know who your enemy is. They're the ones that caused it. It's not some shadowy cabal that caused it. It's not some foreign entity. It's right here at home. And a lot of these people, you see them at the grocery store every day. You go to school with them. You go to work with them. They are right here, living their lives out. And the only thing that separates them thing that separates them from Tyler Robinson is that they don't have the balls to actually do it. They don't want to face the consequences. If they could get away with it, they would do exactly what Tyler Robinson did. They would do exactly what the Minneapolis trans shooter did, and far, far worse. They would do it all and have no remorse about it. They would laugh in your face as they did it. That's your enemy. That's who we have to defeat. Keep your eye on the ball. That's all I'm saying. I do want to move on here and talk about another topic. I mean, it's all related to the Kirk assassination. I mean, it is the news since it happened. It's the biggest story, that I've seen in a long time. But I do want to kind of pivot from that. So tonight, the big news, particularly tonight, was that Jimmy Kimmel basically got canceled. His show is suspended indefinitely, which probably means he's going off the air forever. And Kimmel was canceled for essentially he had done a show. I don't remember what day this was. I think it was a couple days ago. And he just outright lied on his show and just openly claimed this guy, Tyler Robinson, who was clearly a man of the left, clearly a radical leftist. Jimmy Kimmel just outright said he was a right-wing MAGA guy. Just outright said it and had no evidence for it, just lied to your face on air. Just a blatant, bold-faced lie. Just a despicable, disgusting lie. Said right to your faces on air on his show. And there was an uproar among the right online. There was an uproar in right-wing media. And ABC, Disney, they acted and they canned him. They canceled him. He's not the only one, obviously. Now, Kimmel's sin is pretty egregious. For someone who's in media to get it that wrong. And obviously, Jimmy Kimmel didn't get it wrong. He knew what he was doing. Jimmy Kimmel, he knew that he lied, okay? Kimmel knew that he was lying. There was ample evidence of who this guy Tyler Robinson was and why he did it. And Kimmel just lied to everyone's faces. He didn't care. He knew he was lying. He didn't give a shit because he's a despicable partisan actor who will go to any lengths to support the narrative. And they canned him for it. So he's one that's been canceled, quote unquote. Obviously, there's thousands more that we've seen who have been effectively canceled, okay? All these people that have made TikTok videos and posted on Twitter in the aftermath of the assassination, these leftists celebrating it. You've seen a right-wing mob on Twitter and etc. tracking these people down, doxing them, calling their employers, saying, hey, this person works for you. They've gotten fired. I mean, it's just the same exact tactics that the left was using at the height of cancel culture, which, of course, Charlie Kirk was so deeply opposed to. He hated cancel culture, as I think we all did. That being said, I do have a couple of points on this. Now, I will start off by saying Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General, was giving an interview and basically said something along the lines of the interview of like, well, there's a difference between hate speech and free speech. And hate speech we might have to look at, and free speech is fine. But once it crosses a certain line, and I was disgusted by that interview. It just made me think, God, I wish Matt Gaetz was the Attorney General right now. I wish our government wasn't so corrupt and spineless and Republicans weren't such backstabbing cretins that we could have gotten Matt Gaetz in as Attorney General instead of this dumb broad Pam Bondi, who's an idiot, by the way. She's just a low IQ idiot, by the way. But she basically says, well, there's a difference between hate speech and free speech. She's talking exactly like a leftist from like prime 2019, the height of Me Too and cancel culture and all that bullshit. I mean, it was just disgusting to watch this come out of the mouth of one of the most senior officials in the Trump administration. I was disgusted by it. A lot of right-wingers called her out on it. They even took quote tweets of Charlie saying there is no such thing as hate speech, stuff like this. There's only free speech. You can't define hate speech. You can't categorize hate speech. There is no such thing as hate speech. And eventually Pam Bondi walked it back because she saw, okay, this is stupid of me to say, which it was, but she's not a smart person, like I said. I think the right is pretty unified that there is no such thing as hate speech, right? Because what do you categorize as hate speech? It's there is no definition for it. It's just a way for the government to destroy your free speech rights, which is absolutely true. And of course, I believe that wholeheartedly. But at the same time, the right has engaged in these like very reminiscent of like left-wing cancel culture mobs on social media to track down these leftists who supported the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who celebrated it. And like a lot of them have been fired from their jobs. A lot of them have been, faced ostracization for what they said. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different tact here. I don't have any problem with these people getting fired. No problem whatsoever. There is a big difference from saying there are only two genders. There is a big difference between saying I'm pro-life. There's a big difference between saying I don't know if I believe this, E. Jean Carroll type person who says Donald Trump raped her 20 years ago and can't remember the day or the month or the year that it happened. There's a big difference between not believing her or believing in traditional marriage and supporting that. Big difference than in doing all of that. There's a big difference in even just calling someone a faggot or saying fuck you. There's even a big difference in saying the N-word, which I will not say. I'm on YouTube right now. But there's a big difference between saying the N-word and celebrating someone's assassination. Big difference between that. There's a big, big difference. Yeah, one may be crude, one may be crass. Others, like the political opinions that I just kind of laid out that you could get canceled for back in the day, those are just valid political opinions that are shared by a majority of the country. You could be canceled for all of that in the past, whether it was saying the N-word on kind of the extreme spectrum of it, just in terms of like rudeness, to, just supporting or being opposed to like Black Lives Matter or something like that, or believing there are only two genders. You get canceled for that back in the day. No matter what side of the spectrum you fall on when it comes to like rudeness, okay? I think we can all agree out there. There's a big, big, big difference between that and celebrating the murder of a young father and husband for just engaging in political debate. There's a big difference between that. There's a big moral difference between those two things. Celebrating anyone's death, by the way. There's a big moral difference between that and like calling someone the N-word. Big difference between celebrating someone's death and saying that there are two genders, that transsexualism is wrong. There's a big moral difference between that and celebrating anyone's death, anyone's assassination. So I think that's one reason why, even though these tactics that have been used by the right in the past few days have very much resembled the tactics of the left historically. I mean, this is a cancel mob on the right that are going after these people who celebrated Charlie's death and getting them fired, getting them, whatever, creating problems in their life. Even though the mobs look very similar, we're going after something entirely different. Okay, we're not going after someone for saying a naughty word. We're not going after someone for holding a legitimate political opinion, which, by the way, all political opinions, I believe, are legitimate. And no one should be canceled for their political opinions, even if they're extreme. But there's a difference between saying a naughty word or having a controversial political opinion and actively cheering on the death of a young father and a young husband. There's a massive moral difference there. And I have no problem whatsoever with seeing these people get sent to the, social gulag, you could say. It's actually great. What have I been saying? These people need to be thrown out of polite society. And they are being thrown out of polite society. And that's a good thing. You celebrate someone's death, you celebrate someone's murder, you do it. These people aren't even being doxxed. They're saying it out in the open under their own names, with their own faces. They are saying it out in the open, supporting Charlie's assassination and celebrating it. If you have the gall to do that, you should never be allowed in polite society again, period. into discussion. That's all a good thing. I have nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, even though the right's actions online have very much resembled the cancel culture mobs of the left from back in the day. Again, there's a massive moral difference between saying a naughty word or having a controversial political opinion and actively celebrating someone's assassination, someone's murder. There's a massive moral difference between those two things. And so I have no problem with seeing these people get quote unquote canceled. I support it, actually. It's great. To all you keyboard warriors out there who are getting these people canceled or reporting them to their employers, etc. Good on you. Good on you. It's a small step. It's a small step in defeating the left. But if we can get this type that are so brazen about their despicable, disgusting, moral point of view, who are so brazen about their nihilistic attitudes that they are willing to celebrate an assassination live on social media behind their own names. If we can get them shunned from polite society, that's a small step in defeating the left. It's a good first step, but it's good. It's not going to do everything, but there's nothing wrong with it. The other thing that I will say is with canceling these people, getting them fired, whatever. The other thing, which is why I don't think it has any sort of moral equivalence to the left's cancel culture from back in the day. The reason that I think they're so substantially different, the other reason is because all of these people who are celebrating Charlie's death, trust me, they would try to get you fired and get you banned from social media and expelled from polite society for just having a normal political opinion. These are the people who would cancel you in a heartbeat. And now they're crying when they get canceled for doing something that is so reprehensible. Like, it's not saying a naughty word. It's not what these people are doing. It's not like they said the N-word. They're not saying a naughty word. It's not like they held a controversial political opinion, which really isn't even that controversial. These people are actively cheering on and celebrating the murder of a young father, of a young husband, who by all accounts was a wonderful father and a wonderful husband. There's a massive moral difference between that and what the left was canceling you for. And trust me, all these people who are getting canceled now for celebrating Charlie's death, they would cancel you for these petty little things that they would cancel you for in the past. They would get you kicked off social media. They would try to. They would try and get you fired from your job. They would do it in a heartbeat to you. Don't think twice about doing it to them. So I've got no sympathy for them, no remorse. I cheer on the right for getting these people fired. I think it's great. I don't see anything wrong with it. You actively celebrate the murder of a young father and a young husband for political reasons, which makes it even worse in some ways. I have no problem with seeing you get canceled. No problem whatsoever. I see no problem with you getting fired from your job. You had it coming because you are a dark, demented, and reprehensible person to your core. If you're going to say something like that, and not even do it anonymously, say it under your own name. Say it with your face. Post your face all over social media under your own goddamn name. And you don't give a shit because you're so comfortable. Think so highly of yourself. You think you can get away with it. And you think that people will accept it in polite society. And you know why these people think that they will be accepted for these reprehensible opinions? Why they think that they'll get away with it is because if they didn't go on social media and said this stuff, and if they just said these things and celebrated Charlie's death in front of their leftist friends, they all would have celebrated. All their leftist friends would have celebrated Charlie's assassination. That's why they think they can get away with it out in the open, because they're in these bubbles. And they're so isolated. They believe so strongly, and they all think this way. So for all the people who have gotten fired from their jobs or canceled for publicly celebrating Charlie's death, trust me, there are 10 more who have celebrated it privately. I guarantee that. Now, the Jimmy Kimmel situation, him getting canceled is a little bit different because he never celebrated Charlie's death. But what he did do was blatantly lie about it. Blatantly lie about the suspect and try and blame Charlie's death on the right and say that the suspect was a MAGA Republican, Groyper, or whatever. And a lot of leftist journalists have done that. Jimmy Kimmel wasn't the only one. Now, Kimmel being canned is great. And all of these other left-wing journalists who have tried to turn this guy into a right-winger, they should all be fired because that is just journalistic malpractice. I mean, if you're just going to go on, I mean, at least when the media lies to you, they do so, typically speaking, when the media lies to you, they do so either by omission or they spin the story in such a way that you're so discombobulated, your boomer cable news mind can't handle it, and you just believe whatever the television is telling you, and they'll spin it in such a way that you won't even know the real story. But there is still a certain standard in journalism that if you just outright make shit up, like, you can't keep your job. You know, if you just make shit up, if you just openly lie about something on air, like, you're done. You're canned. You know, you can't just write a story that is just false. That's just made up of lies. And so I have no problem with Jimmy Kimmel getting canned. I think a lot more journalists who have lied about Tyler Robinson being a right winger in any sort of way, they should get canned as well. They should all be fired. They should all lose their jobs because they've committed such gross malpractice that even the media can't take it. Even the media, it's such gross journalistic malpractice that it's even a little too much for the lying media to take. I mean, that's how bad it was. So I have no problem with that at all, and I'm happy it happened. I mean, obviously Kimmel is just not funny, and he's just a total fucking sad loser. I mean, he's just putzing around on late night. He's a nobody. The only reason we talk about him is because he's on late night. All these late night guys, they get about as many views as shit. These late night guys, they probably don't get a whole lot more views than I'm going to get with this video. And it's my second fucking YouTube video ever. No one watches them. We just know them because they're on established networks that have been around forever. But yeah, can them. Get rid of them. I mean, it's such gross journalistic malpractice that, you shouldn't be allowed to read the news or go on, write the news ever again if you're just going to make shit up about this assassin to try and pin it on the right somehow. And the evidence, again, is overwhelmingly that this guy was a leftist terrorist who was sleeping with a transvestite. So I have no problem with any of that. I'm going to kind of wrap things up here just by, kind of closing tonight. Again, I've got nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with the sort of cancel culture mobs that we've seen come from the right in recent days in the wake of the assassination. Nothing wrong with getting rid of Kimmel and all these other journalists who do that as well. I mean, the last point that I want to make regarding this is I saw a poll somewhere. It came out a couple of days ago, I want to say. And it was something like 24% of the public believed that this guy was a radical right winger. And only like 21% of the public thought this guy was a radical leftist. I mean, that is the deception and the lies of the media on display right now. It's these boneheaded boomers and these insane, blue-haired, nose-ringed leftists who watch Hassan Piker and Destiny and all this bullshit, that they actually believe this guy was a right winger. They actually believe it. It just goes back to my prior point, regarding Tyler Robinson. Don't get distracted, people, okay? I know we all love conspiracies. This is as cut and dry as it gets. This guy was a crazy leftist. And the only thing that enabled him to commit this heinous crime was the superstructure around him from his leftist friends who are all nihilists. They'll hate God. They'll hate themselves probably, to the leftist streamers online who have actively called for violence, to the academia that has implanted these sort of leftist notions in people's heads, and all the way up to the media, which will just lie and spin like they have, to the point where now 24% of the public believes that Tyler Robinson was like a right-wing griper. That is your enemy. That is your enemy, people. It's not some shadowy cabal. It's not some, conspiracy. It's not some hidden figure behind the scenes. It's not Wizard of Oz with a smoke and mirrors show. That's not your enemy. Your enemy is right here in front of you, and they have names and they have addresses. That's your enemy. We know who they are. They're right in front of us. They posted their faces all over social media. They're on your TV screens every night. They're on your Twitch streams every night. You see them every day, just going to the store, going to get a coffee, going to school, going to work. You see them every single day. That's your enemy. Don't take your eye off the ball. So that's kind of my major point here is, just to the right in general. Don't take your eye off the ball here. Don't get distracted. This is not a cabal. This is not conspiracy. This is a crazy leftist who was enabled and allowed to commit this heinous murder because of a leftist, anti-American superstructure that exists in our society and has penetrated and permeated every major institution of civil society in America. Those are your enemies. Those are your enemies. Don't forget it. Don't forget it. Keep your eye on the ball. And that is what I will leave you with. So I should be back here tomorrow night. I hope everyone enjoyed this. I'll be posting this, so it'll stay on my channel. And I really appreciate any support that I get. And yeah, thank you very much. Y'all have a good night.